My name is Claire Rowen, and I was thrown out of my family's home on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember the exact date, March 16th, 2015, because it was the day after I found out I was pregnant, and the day before my life officially ended in their eyes. I was 25 years old, living in the back room of my parents' two-story house in Louisville, Kentucky. My mother, Linda, ruled the household with crisp white gloves and a Bible she wielded like a weapon. My father, Hank, mostly nodded behind her. We were that kind of family. Polished, conservative, careful with our image, church on Sundays, casserole for grieving neighbors, and never ever dirty laundry outside the walls. I was the oldest of three. The quiet one, the bright one, the one they thought they could count on to follow the path college, marriage, babies in that order. So when I got pregnant before even finishing my teaching certificate, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a scandal. And, worse in their minds, it wasn't just any boy. It was Ezra Bell, a 30-year-old English teacher at my community college. The news didn't break like a whisper. It exploded like a pipe bomb. Not just in our home, but in the church, the neighborhood, the school board. And here's the thing, they never asked me what happened. They never once sat me down and said, "Claire, are you okay? Or did he hurt you?" Or even just talk to us. They assumed, they judged, and then they punished. I still hear my mother's voice echoing in that living room, framed by floral drapes and a Jesus painting above the fireplace. "What have you done?" She didn't scream it. She declared it like a sentence passed down from a bench. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady, steely. It wasn't grief I saw in her eyes. It was rage, the kind that comes from fear dressed as righteousness. You've humiliated this family. You've destroyed your future. And for what? A moment of lust with a man who should have known better. My father stood beside her like a cardboard cutout, not meeting my eyes. He only spoke once. "We can't have this in our home, Claire. You know that." I remember standing there barefoot on the cold tiles, still in my scrubs, from my part-time job at the clinic. The smell of reheated meatloaf lingered in the air, and all I could think was they'd rather protect their reputation than their daughter. I didn't argue. What could I say that would matter to people who had already decided my story wasn't worth hearing? I packed that night. A duffel bag of clothes, my nursing textbooks, one ultrasound photo barely the size of a postcard. I didn't cry in front of them, but when I closed the front door behind me, when the porch light flickered above my head, like it was sighing too, I let the tears fall. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because I knew something none of them did. I wasn't ashamed. And one day I would make sure they regretted every word they threw at me like stones. But that day wasn't today. Today I was alone, pregnant, and officially the family disgrace. I stayed the first 2 nights in my rusting 2000 Corolla parked behind a shuttered dry cleaner off Bardstown Road. I had $38 to my name, half a tank of gas, and a blueberry muffin I rationed in quarters. It wasn't survival, it was suspension. I hadn't fully landed in this new version of my life yet. I was floating, waiting to crash. On the 3rd morning, I walked into the women's health clinic where I'd worked as a receptionist 2 evenings a week. It was the only place that hadn't changed overnight. The coffee still tasted like burnt almonds. The light still flickered above the patient check-in desk. And Marla, the nurse practitioner who ran the place like a general with a clipboard, still wore pink Crocs with cat stickers on them. She took one look at my face and said, "Come in the back, now." We sat in the staff break room across from a dented microwave and a stack of unread parenting magazines. She waited until I was done telling the whole story, from the 2 lines on the pregnancy test to the last thing my mother said before I walked out the door. "You are not welcome in this house unless you terminate that mistake." Marla didn't blink. She just said, "You're staying with me. I've got a fold-out sofa and a neurotic pug. Neither of them bites." That's how I survived the next few weeks on kindness I hadn't earned and a sofa that smelled like lavender and old popcorn. I picked up more shifts at the clinic, enough to scrape together rent for a small room above a bookstore downtown, once Marla's niece needed the space back. Meanwhile, Ezra Bell vanished. He didn't run, he was fired. The college called it a necessary administrative action pending review. No charges were filed. There was no evidence of coercion. But the optics 30 and 25 professor and student single woman pregnant were damning enough. He sent me one message before they took his faculty account down. "Claire, I'm so sorry. If you ever need me anything, I'll be there. I swear, I never answered." Not because I didn't believe him, but because I couldn't afford to believe in anyone just then. I was living week to week, rotating between clinics and diners, slipping into GED prep classes on weekends to finish what college had never completed. My belly grew. My shame didn't. What people called a mistake, I called a reckoning. When I was 6 months pregnant, I saw my brother Ben outside a pharmacy. He was with his girlfriend, all clean smiles and pastel sweaters. He froze when he saw me, his older sister with a swollen stomach and eyes that didn't look away anymore. "You look tired," he said, like it was a symptom I could shake off. "You look safe," I replied flat. He didn't ask where I was living, didn't ask how I was surviving, just nodded stiffly and said, "Mom's still hoping you'll come to your senses." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Tell her I did. That's why I left. By the time Aaron was born in late November, I was no longer floating. I was anchored in exhaustion and instinct in this tiny human who blinked up at me like I was the only thing he trusted. I named him Aaron Ezra Rowen, not to honor his father, but to remind myself that even from scorched earth, something strong could grow. And one day I'd make sure the world knew it. I learned early that poverty doesn't just steal your money. It steals your time, your energy, your dignity in slow daily increments. Aaron was 2 weeks old the first time I had to choose between diapers or bus fare. I walked 5 miles that day with him strapped to my chest in a second-hand carrier and didn't look anyone in the eye. Not out of shame by then, I'd burned through that, but because I couldn't afford the luxury of explanations. I worked night shifts first as a waitress at a 24-hour diner, then as a janitor at a middle school. By day, I studied for my certification in early childhood development, not because I wanted to be a teacher anymore, but because I needed a license to open a childcare business, my newest desperate idea. People think single motherhood is lonely. It is, of course. But it's also crowded, stuffed with noise. Aaron's colic cries, unpaid bills rattling in your brain at 3 a.m., judgment from every side. At least when I lived out of my car, I had silence. What I didn't have, I built. I turned the storage room in my studio apartment into a makeshift daycare, took in 3 kids from single mothers I met at the clinic, $5 an hour, snacks included. When we outgrew that space, I borrowed a church basement on off days. Then a friend of Marla's, an ex-nun named Josephine, donated her garage. And that's when the Phoenix Room was born. It wasn't fancy, just Matt's books, broken toys I fixed with glue and prayer. But it was safe. And when you've known what it's like to feel disposable, you learn to build spaces that feel permanent, even if they're held together with duct tape and willpower. By the time Aaron turned 4, we had 35 kids on our waiting list. I applied for nonprofit status, launched weekend classes for teen moms who dropped out, found a retired math teacher to teach GED prep in the corner during nap time. We weren't just watching kids anymore. We were giving their mothers a way back in. I didn't tell anyone from my old life, not because I was hiding, but because they'd made it clear they didn't care to look. The only trace of them was a yearly birthday card from my Aunt May. No return address, just a $50 bill and one sentence. "Your mother still prays for you. I pray for her." I never responded. I figured that prayer chain was long enough without me. Aaron grew into the kind of boy who remembered strangers' names and offered to carry grocery bags for old ladies without being asked. He had his father's long fingers, my defiant eyebrows, and a wild curiosity that sometimes scared me. Once at 7, he tried to take apart the toaster to understand the heat. I didn't tell him much about Ezra, just that he was smart, kind, and gone. The kind of gone you don't chase, but Aaron never asked for more. He was too busy building, learning, becoming. And somewhere between sleepless nights, government grant applications, and chasing toddlers through donated beanbag mazes, I stopped feeling like a failure. I wasn't the family disgrace anymore. I was the founder of something bigger than shame. 10 years passed. 10 years without phone calls or apologies or Christmas cards. Until one spring morning when the Phoenix Room made the local news after Aaron won a statewide science scholarship. The photo showed us standing side by side, me in my thrifted blazer, Aaron in his crooked tie, holding a plaque with both our names engraved beneath the words, "In honor of Ezra Bell, who taught us to ask why." And that was the first time my mother ever called me since the day she screamed, "What have you done?" She didn't say hello. Just, "We saw the news. Can we come visit?" The day after Aaron's photo hit the news, my inbox flooded, not from family, that would come later, but from foundations, schools, women's shelters, and 3 different community colleges. They wanted to partner, donate, interview me. Apparently, all it took was a 10-year-old boy with a sharp mind and a shy smile holding a plaque that said, "In honor of Ezra Bell, for the world to care what we were building." One journalist called us proof that grace grows in hard places. I wasn't sure about grace, but I knew grit. And I knew this: I hadn't survived to be a footnote in someone else's feel-good story. I was ready to tell my own. By summer, the Phoenix Room expanded into a donated warehouse space just outside the city. We painted the concrete walls with murals of women and children rising through fire. I hired 5 staff, 3 of them former students of our GED program. Our new motto, stenciled across the entrance, read, "We don't rescue, we rebuild." Aaron helped pick the words. At 10, he understood more than most adults I knew. He designed the logo himself, a tiny child holding a hammer, standing atop a pile of ashes. It was during this time, while printing brochures for our first donor gala, that I got a letter in the mail. A real one. Cream envelope, no return address, inside a folded newspaper clipping of the news article. A note written in my mother's elegant practice script. I was wrong. We were wrong. We would like to meet Aaron. Linda, I sat on the floor surrounded by half-packed supply boxes and glitter glue and stared at the page until my eyes blurred. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I placed the letter under a paperweight shaped like a phoenix wing and went back to work. Let them wait. I had waited 10 years. Meanwhile, Aaron was thriving. He spent his mornings at public school, his afternoons at the Phoenix Room, tutoring younger kids, and his evenings reading things most children wouldn't touch until high school. He asked once if his scholarship came with a suit. "I want to look like I belong when we go to DC. "Baby," I said, straightening his collar, "you belong everywhere." A month later, he was invited to present his prototype, a low-cost water filtration device made from recycled materials at a youth innovation summit in Washington. It was the first time either of us had ever been on a plane. Standing in that convention hall surrounded by parents in pearls and kids with private tutors, I didn't feel small. I felt like a threat because I knew something they didn't. Every chart-topping resume in that room started with a launch pad. Ours started with being thrown out the front door. On the flight home, Aaron leaned his head on my shoulder and whispered, "Do you think Grandpa and Grandma are still mad about when you had me?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked, "Do you want to meet them?" He thought for a moment. I want them to meet me, but I'm not going to pretend. Neither was I. So when the knock came on our door 2 weeks later, Linda and Hank standing there older and smaller than I remembered, with my brother Ben behind them, I didn't rush to open it. I adjusted my son's collar, straightened my back, and let them see what rose from the fire they started. The knock was soft, polite, as if they didn't want to disturb anything. But it rattled something deep in me anyway. I opened the door slowly. My mother stood in a navy cardigan, her hands folded like she was back at Sunday choir. Her hair was gray now, pulled into the same tight bun I remembered from childhood, not a strand out of place. Her lipstick pale rose, conservative, careful, familiar. My father was beside her, thinner, stooped slightly, holding his hat like it might float away. He used to seem tall. Now he looked like a man slowly dissolving. Behind them, Ben, my brother, stood awkwardly, a bakery box in his hands. Peace offering or prop, I wasn't sure. "Hi, Claire," Mom said, first voice quiet. "Linda," I answered. "Not Mom. Not yet." They flinched like I'd slapped them. Good. Words mattered now. This is for you," she added, reaching out the envelope. Inside, a donation receipt for the Phoenix Room, $5,000. Anonymous, of course. "You think that buys you a do-over?" I asked, not moving to take it. My father cleared his throat. "We didn't come to argue. We came because we saw Aaron on the news. You saw the plaque, with Ezra Bell's name on it." My voice was sharper than I intended. My mother stiffened. "We didn't know the truth. Not really. You didn't ask," I shot back. Ben stepped forward, his voice softer. "We made a lot of assumptions. I made a lot of assumptions, and I let you carry the weight of all of it alone." For a moment, the silence held, thick, unforgiving, and then Aaron I called without breaking eye contact. "Come here a second, baby." He appeared behind me, lanky and curious, wiping glue off his fingers from the art table. His curls were wild. His t-shirt read, "Ask me about my prototype." He looked at them like they were puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. "This is your grandfather, your grandmother, and your Uncle Ben," I said evenly. My father tried to smile. It came out as a wince. "You're taller than I expected." Aaron tilted his head. "I'm 10. Silence again. "I've read about you," my mother said, kneeling down just slightly. "We're very proud of you, but you've never met me," he replied. The kid didn't miss. I turned to Aaron gently. "Would you like to sit with them for a while, just to talk?" He considered it, then nodded. "But I get to ask the first question." He led them to the sunlit table in the corner where kids read after snack time. No ceremony, just curiosity and one tiny crack in the wall we'd built. Ben lingered behind. "Claire, if we want to be a family again, where do we start?" I looked at him, then at the worn floor, the stacks of donated shoes, the wall of Mother's graduation photos. "Start by doing for someone else what you didn't do for me. Sponsor 10 girls," I said. "Their names are on that wall. You can start there." They followed Aaron into the Phoenix Room's main space, an open floor with murals of wings, shelves of battered books and laminated posters about STEM scholarships taped to the walls. The air smelled like Crayola and lemon cleaner, warm, alive. Aaron moved with the calm assurance of someone who knew exactly who he was. He led them to the long table near the window, the one lined with projects for our upcoming innovation fair. Solar ovens, DIY microscopes. In the center sat his entry, a working water filtration system made entirely from recycled parts, plastic bottles, cotton pads, a coffee filter, and a repurposed insulin syringe. "I made this after reading about water shortages in Flint," he said, matter of fact. "We're testing prototypes to scale it for mobile clinics." My mother stared at the contraption, visibly unsure what to say. My father blinked several times, mouth open. Ben reached out like he might touch it, then thought better. Aaron didn't flinch. He pointed to the side of the display board where a quote was written in bold permanent marker. "Teach them to ask why, and they'll teach the world how." Ezra Bell. My father inhaled sharply. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Aaron noticed. He glanced at me. I nodded. "That's my dad," he said. "He died before I was born, but he was a teacher. Mom says he taught her how to ask better questions, so now I try to do the same." Silence bloomed like smoke. I watched it hit them, not like a punch, but like a mirror. Ezra Bell, the man they'd turned into a scandal, the name they'd scrubbed from conversation, the ghost they thought they buried. And here he was, alive in Aaron's voice, his hands, his restless mind. The resemblance was unmistakable. Ezra's posture, the sharp focus in the eyes, the same way of tilting his head when curious. Even the smile, half crooked and slow building like sunlight after rain. My mother sat down visibly shaking. My father whispered almost to himself, "He looks just like—" "I know," I said. No rage, no victory, just truth plain and unflinching. "You tried to erase him. You tried to erase me," I continued. "But you planted the seed anyway." Aaron was already moving to help another child adjust a model volcano, as if he hadn't just resurrected a man they'd condemned, as if he didn't carry 10 years of silence in his DNA and still rise like morning. My family didn't say much after that. Not because they didn't have words, but because they finally realized they'd used the wrong ones for too long. They stayed for 20 minutes, long enough to hear Aaron explain his invention to a visiting journalist, long enough to walk past the wall of donors and see that Ezra Bell's name appeared again this time, on a bronze plaque that read, "For the teacher who changed everything." They didn't touch it, but they looked. Before they left, my mother turned to me, her voice thin but steady. "We've missed so much." "Yes," I said. "You have." She started to say something else, but I held up a hand. "I'm not ready to talk about forgiveness. That's not what this is." She nodded slowly. "What is it then?" I glanced at Aaron across the room, kneeling to tie a younger kid's shoe, laughing as he stood. "It's acknowledgement," I said. "And that's a start. But if you want to be in his life, you show up. You listen. You serve." I gestured to the wall behind her. 10 names handwritten on sticky notes under the title, "Next Girls to Rise." Sponsor them. Mentor them. Give them what you didn't give me. Ben stepped forward first. "We will." They left without hugs, without closure, but also without denial. Aaron walked over as the door closed behind them. "That was weird," he said, squinting, "but kind of okay." "Kind of okay is a good place to start," I replied. Then I bent down, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Let's go build something better."